In 2024, one of my biggest reading goals is to read my entire physical TBR down to 0. In today's video, this is my first check-in going over with you guys the progress that I made. I'm a little bit late to filming this video, but all of the books that I will be discussing and all of the updates in this video are from January. I made really good progress. I have quite a few books to the side that I will talk about that I'm going to unhaul. I have a few that I DNF'd. Getting into pile number 1, the books that I finished in January for my physical TBR. We Were Never Here by Andrea Bartz. If I can remember, I will try to tell you guys like how long I have had these books on my shelves. So it's been about a year now that it's sat on my shelf. When I finished this book, I was debating if I wanted to keep it on my shelf or not, because I think that's something I'm going to find a lot throughout this challenge, is that the books that are unread, I feel like I'm going to end up reading them and I might enjoy them, but I'm not going to feel a need or desire to hang on to a physical copy of that book on my shelf. Because my long-term goal with these bookshelves is to have them only house like my top tier, absolute favorite, like all-time favorite books. So I don't want to hang on to mediocre books, pretty much. I rated it a 3-star initially, and I thought I was going to end up unhauling it. But the longer and longer that it has sat with me, the more that I want to hang on to it, and I ended up bumping up my rating to a 4-star. I'm keeping this for now. I liked it. The next one that I read was Disappearance at Devil's Rock by 𝚆𝙸𝚃𝙃. This one I have not had for too terribly long. And you know what? Here's the thing too. I actually read this book and this book with the audio version. 9.999 times out of 10. I am always going to choose the audiobook version because it's just how my brain processes information the best. So that's another reason. It's like, why am I hoarding unread books on my shelf when I know that when I do read them, if I do ever get to read them, I'm going to borrow the audiobook from my library. I actually really enjoyed this book too. I am also rating this book 4 stars. This was a really, like I said, this was a very successful month. I am unhauling a lot of books. I made my way through quite a bit of my unreads, as well as I really enjoyed a lot of them. I truly believe that this is 𝚆𝙸𝚃𝙃𝙃's best work, and I've read quite a few of his books at this point. I thought this book was so fascinating. I do feel like parts of this book ran a little bit long for me, and that's something I always feel like with 𝚆𝙸𝚃𝙃𝙃's work is it gets a bit wordy where I feel like it doesn't need to be. Like, we can get to the point. Some parts dragged a little bit, but especially the middle towards the end portion. I feel like the book really starts picking up when we get some of the reveals. One of the suspects of this book, I was so fascinated with their character. I wanted to like get inside their head. This one is totally gonna stick with me. Like, that ending, I keep thinking about it. Like, it'll just pop into my head at random points throughout the day. It's scary and it's dark, but it's gonna stick with me. I like this one a lot. 4 stars, my favorite 𝚆𝙸𝚃𝙃 yet. All right, so the next 3 I read, I'm going to go through these super quickly. So there are 3 graphic novels in this series, and it is this Labyrinth Coronation series. The film Labyrinth is one of my top 2 favorite films of all time. If you make me choose a favorite film, I will tell you Labyrinth or Coraline. That's it. Those are like my holy grail movies. I have owned these 3 on my shelf again for about a year, maybe like a year and a half. I loved these. I had so much fun reading them. So pretty much with this, it's only a 3 volume collection, and it is following the Goblin King Jareth in his backstory, his origin story. How did he become the Goblin King? So the first volume, I rated this 5 stars. I thought this book was phenomenal. I was honestly shocked how well this series built upon the story from the film. I did not know like where they were going to go with it. How were they going to stay true to the atmosphere of the movie, but tell a new and different story that still felt like it you know, was a part of the same universe. And I feel like they nailed it. The second volume, I also rated 5 stars, and oh my goodness, this book had one of the best plot twists I have ever read. I gasped out loud when we got to it. This was such a fun volume. I really love the characters. The final volume, I ended up rating a 4 star, so it wasn't, to me, it wasn't as good as the first 2. Some parts kind of worked out a little bit too easily. We're in the final volume and there's a lot of loose ends to wrap up, a lot of things that we've been building up to from the first 2. And when it comes down to it and it comes time for those things to happen, I felt like they just wrapped up too quickly. And it was like you almost overpromised. You overpromised in your first 2 volumes and you couldn't deliver it in your last volume. As a whole, I really enjoyed this little 3-volume series here. I feel like it built really well upon the film. That is my stack of books that I was able to actually fully read, cover to cover in January. So these are going to be subtracted from my total. The next pile is my stack of books that I started and I ended up DNFing them because I was not enjoying them, and I am such a DNFer. I will DNF a book like that if it's not working for me, if it's not interesting to me, because I have so many books to read. It's like, how much time, you know, how long do I sit around giving my energy to this book, waiting for it to get good, and it may never get good. So the first one here is The Nest by Cynthia Sweeney. I picked this book up at a little free library. So to make my point about DNFing, I quit this book at 3%. 3%. That's like nothing, right? I was so bored. Like I said, I need you to hook me. I need you to get my attention. I'm not gonna sit around and wait for you to get good. You know, you have to be good from the start. And that is the unfortunate thing with just how many books are available to us nowadays. It's like, I'm sorry, The Nest, you might have gotten better, but you weren't doing anything for me. The next book I DNF'd at 4%, and that was Toad by Katherine Dunn. It felt very meandering, which honestly, it's not an issue to me. Like, your narrative can be kind of like all over the place, you know, stream of consciousness, that's okay. But if that is the story, then I need it to come from a narrator that I find compelling in some way. And this narrator to me was very boring. There was nothing about their voice that was speaking to me in any way. This one I picked up from a library book sale maybe 3 or 4 months ago. So this is another one that hasn't been on my shelf too terribly long. And the final book that I ended up DNFing in January is Fly Away by Kathleen Jennings. I DNF'd this book at 36% in. It is a very short little thing here, so 36% into this, you know, it probably was about the same amount of time that I gave these other 2 books. And this one was such a disappointment for me. I ended up getting this book like 2 Christmases ago at Barnes & Noble's. I picked this book up because of some of the quotes on the back, like some of these little blurbs, they sold me on this book. Like this quote on the back from Alex E. Harrow. Shirley Jackson Down Under, a brooding, bruising fairy tale about blood in history and sharp-toothed things waiting in the woods. There was so many characters and so many like different character names. I didn't know who everybody was. There were so many names being thrown at us with like little to no context. So that's how I felt with this book. I felt really lost. By 36% in, I felt like something should have been clicking a little bit more for me and it wasn't. So this one was just a huge, major disappointment for me. Let's move into the next pile now. Books that I did not read. I didn't even attempt to read these. 5 books here that I am going to be unhauling. The first one is Paul Tremblay's A Head Full of Ghosts. And I did as well get this book in another, it was the Introvert's Retreat book subscription service. And I am interested still in reading this. I'm not a paperback person. If I'm gonna keep a book on my shelf, I want a hardcover, if it's available in hardcover. And two, I really hate mass market paperbacks, like these tiny little things that are just impossible to read. I'm not about this at all. So I will be, even though I really enjoyed Disappearance at Devil's Rock, I rated it 4 stars. I am going to be unhauling this because I don't like this copy. If I ever do want to have a copy of this for my shelf, I will get it in hardcover, and that's just my preference as a reader. I'm not subscribed to that service, the Introverts Retreat service. Every book that they have sent has been in a mass market paperback form. My sister gifted me for my birthday last year. She gifted me several book subscription services for like a couple of months. And okay, so the next two is actually from another one of those subscription services, and that one is Once Upon a Book Club. So the first one is One Puzzling Afternoon by Emily Critchley. I don't know, I'm not like majorly pulled towards this, and again, if I do decide to read it, I'm going to listen to the audiobook version, and I don't feel like a super burning need to keep the physical copy on my shelf until that time. And hey, if I end up loving it, if it becomes a favorite book of all time, if I do one day read it from the library, I can always find myself another copy one day. But there's no reason that I need to keep this sitting around on my shelf just gathering dust. Like, I don't need that for myself, you know? The next one was also from the Once Upon a Book Club subscription, and that is The Fairy Tale Life of Dorothy Gale. This one also, it sounded cute, it sounded interesting, but again, I am never going to read this physical copy. And I don't really feel like this is totally my genre. This is like a contemporary, I don't think it's strictly romance, but it's like a contemporary, you know? Like, it's just not my vibe. The next one that I've decided to unhaul is this ARC copy of True North by Andrew Graff. I actually ended up going to like a book signing, and they had several authors there. They actually also had Sam Rebling. I have not read this. I ended up getting it there that day though, because I thought it was so cool I had never been to an author's, like a book signing. I've never been to one. They also, okay, so another really cool guest they had was Allie Carter, which is definitely like a nostalgic favorite, and it was so cool to see her speak. Yeah, but I bought Edenville there, and he ended up signing it for me. Okay, so December 2nd, 2023, that's when it was. But yeah, it was a really cool experience. At the end of that signing, pretty much everybody got one advanced reader's copy, and this was the one I ended up getting, True North. I don't know. I just don't know if I ever see myself actually reading this book, so I will be unhauling it for now. The final one from this stack is Naomi Novik's Spinning Silver. I just don't see myself reading this within the next year, and if I'm not gonna read it in a year's time, then I don't want to hold on to it anymore. I don't want it in my space. If I want to read it eventually again, I can find myself a copy of this again. I originally found this at a library book sale. If I want it again to read it one day, I can find it again for a good deal. When I first counted and I did that video, I said I have 111 unread books on my physical TBR. However, when I counted this time, after like removing all of these books, I ended up counting a total of 89 books. So that would mean I was either read or unhauling 22 books, and this is not 22, this is barely 10. So I definitely counted wrong my first time around, but that's okay. We're going with our number now. So in the first video I said I had 111. We are now down to 89 unread books on my physical TBR. I am still making good progress. I'm still very excited to be slowly chipping away at this. Like, I feel very motivated. I know that there is more things on this shelf that will be getting unhauled over the course of this year, and I'm really excited. I know I'm gonna do it. I know I'm gonna get to 0 by the end of the year. So wish me luck. If you are also partaking in this in your own way of reading your physical TBR down to 0, I also wish you luck. Please let me know how it's going for you. Have you been picking books from your shelf, or have you been reading library books and buying new things? Because I'm guilty of that too. I have been reading a lot of library books, but it's okay. Like, it's a balance, right? Like we gotta walk that line. Like I read some from the library and then I read some from my shelf. Before I set this intention, I was reading nothing from my shelf, everything from the library. And on top of that, I was still buying books and getting books at library book sales, like in mass, to go sit on the shelf, and none of them was getting read. So as long as the intention is set and the goal is in mind, it's okay if 110% of my focus isn't always in it, you know, as long as there's a balance. So yes, I wish you guys luck, I wish me luck, but other than that, I will see you guys in the next video.